It's mid-February, and in today's video I shall be giving you the 5 seeds that we shall be sowing. Quick update first, you can see that the seeds that we've been sowing for the last 4 weeks or so, they're all doing really well. Really pleased with the onions, and well, they've only got about another month now and they shall actually go out into the plots and we shall be on our way. And the sowings that we made at the beginning of February, week 1, they've all come up to the polytunnel now and they're growing away nicely. Now, before we start getting into the 5 seeds that you can be sowing at mid-February, first thing I want to say is that everything that we sowed at the beginning of February can also be sown now. When we make that video of, I think it's called 15 seeds to sow in February, they could be sown at any time in February. We just choose to stagger ours. It also means that you don't have to sit and watch this video for 55 minutes. If you're watching us for the first time and you haven't seen that video and you want to know what we did sow, then just go back and look at that video, February sowings, week 1. Mid-February is when I like to sow my brassicas. So it's brassica heavy mid-February. And off camera, I've already done this, but I've sown some cabbage, which was Savoy King, and I've also sown some Calabrese broccoli marathon, and I also sowed some cauliflower, which was a variety called Skipper, and they will go out into the plots as usual. But today I want to concentrate on some vegetables that I can grow in the raised beds that we made a couple of videos ago. I will say that everything I'm sowing can also be grown in the plots. They don't have to be grown in raised beds. The reason why I'm growing these varieties is because they are compact. Although there doesn't look an awful lot of room in here, it's amazing just how much food you can grow. And by growing more compact varieties, and the brassicas that I'm shortly going to be sowing, I can get 3 of those in a row.
Can you hear that, Mr. W? Listen carefully.
There's an egg on the way.
There's an egg on the way. We haven't had an egg from the girls for, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, I suppose.
Must be November time since we last had some eggs.
Yeah, at least, probably even October.
Ooh.
I went and had a quick look at Henny Penny, the brown one.
Is it?
Yeah. It's exciting. First egg of the year. And what's the date? The 15th of February.
Yeah.
Super duper.
Now, the first variety that I'm going to sow is an old favourite. It's called Greyhound. Now, myself and Mrs. W actually used to grow this quite a lot when we first started gardening. It's only as the family came along and we all discovered that we like the taste of Savoy cabbage better than these type of cabbage. However, these are a really lovely cabbage. And where you see that the Savoy cabbages and some of the bigger bald cabbages, they have leaves out here, and you're going to need, 18 inches, even up to 24 inches per plant to get your harvest. These are a conical shape. They take up less room and they only need planting at 12-inch intervals. I filled my module tray with some fresh compost and I'm just going to make some divots. And as always when I sow brassicas, I'm aiming for 2 seeds per cell. And if 2 come up, then we just thin to the strongest seedling.
So
we'll just stick the label in there. And then next door to that, I'm actually going to sow some cauliflower. The variety is Skipper, which I talked about earlier, and I've got some of those going out in the outdoor plots. But again, just like the greyhound, this cauliflower can be planted at 12-inch distances, and its form is upright, so it doesn't have the big floppily leaves that you often see on cauliflowers. And again, just like the cabbage, we'll just drop 2 seeds per cell in. Stick a label in that, and we'll just cover it over with some vermiculite. Mrs. W's got me a water bath ready. Next, I want to sow some kohl rabi. And you saw the purple ones that we had last year. They were really lovely. But I do find at this time of the year, the greeny white ones grow better at this time of year. The purple ones I tend to find do better for us in the autumn months. So this is a variety called Super Schmelz. And again, I'm going to put these into the raised bed because they don't need an awful lot of room. You can get 1 or 2 kohl rabi in that space. And then lastly, for the brassicas, I want to sow some turnips. And this is a variety called Tokyo Cross. And I've grown several varieties of turnip over the years, but this is the only one that I will actually grow now. It's of a really small size, but therefore it doesn't get really woody, and it's really quite sweet tasting. And I know Mrs. W does like to grate that into salads, don't you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Now with the turnips, I multi-sow them. Four or 5 seeds in each cell. And just like the beetroots, they will grow and actually manage to push each other out so they can find the room to grow. You only want them to get about that big anyway, so it does work really well. So let's get a label in those and cover them over with some vermiculite. Now, the last seed that I want to sow for mid-February is actually some spring salad onion. As you know, we've already sown some spring salad onions, but one of our viewers suggested a variety called Lilia. I'm quite interested in those. You can see they have a bit of a bulbing shape there. So it looks like you get quite a bit of onion. So I'll be interested to see how they turn out. So let's give those a go. And as with all our spring salad onions, I multi-sow them. And it's great to do your spring or salad onions in this way because you can just take the largest ones if you want, or if you sow 5 or 6 like I am in a cell, and they're all of a good size, you've got your bunch of spring salad onions. And there's a great example of those actually just outside this polytunnel. And a label, Mrs. W. And we'll just get those covered over with some vermiculite, and they can now go into the water bath. Now, I had a comment from, I think it may have been John, I could be wrong, but anyway, I had a comment saying about the shallots that we sowed earlier, and I asked, could they be multi-sown? Now, I certainly think they can. I've done a bit of research into it, and it definitely looks as though you can. So I'm going to actually try multi-sowing some Zebrune shallots. If I can actually do this, and it works okay, it's going to work really great in raised beds where you have less space, but you grow more in the space that you are growing in. I'm trying to aim for 4 or 5 seeds. If you do drop 1 or 2 more in, then just thin them out so that you will be left with just 4 or 5. And if you have managed to have a chance to look back on some of our videos from maybe 3 years ago, we used to grow all of our shallots from sets. And we were successful with that. But we found we liked these better. And anything or any time that I can reduce the amount of things that I bring into our garden, the more I like it, because they will have been grown somewhere else. I don't know what diseases may have been in their plot. You can never know. I don't ever accept any plants from anybody else that they've grown. Seed, yes, but not the plants, because I just don't know what the state of their plots are in. And I would always advise you to do that and not suffer the same fate as myself and Mrs. W, because we did that a few years ago. We actually had some... Were the onion sets? I think they were onion sets, weren't they?
Yes, they were.
And now in plot 3, we can't grow onions because onion white rot is in it. So learn from us. As kind as people are, and it is nice for people to want to give you their plants, you just never ever know what state their plots are in. I really have to plan now where I'm going to put my onions, because I've got less space to grow them and I can't grow them anywhere in plot 3. That just leaves me 3 plots. And I do like to rotate the onions around. So we've got plenty of zabroon. Clearly these won't all go in the raised bed. There won't be enough room for all of it. Well, there probably would be, but it would take up the whole bed. But I am going to dot some of these about in the plots, because we really do like this particular variety.
They're quite a large shallot, aren't they? They're not the small sort of...
Yeah, they are. But you're kind of thinking that if we're going to multi-sow them, they'll actually come out a bit smaller.
Yes.
And in many ways, that's not a bad thing. Because
a selection of sizes.
that we do. Although we've done our 5 seeds that I recommend you sow in mid-February, the shallots were an extra. But I want to try a little something else. Now, we like to grow celery and we like to grow celeriac. And I normally sow that in March. Last season we didn't have a great time with the celeriac, and I think by sowing them in March, they just never really... It just didn't happen for us, did it?
No, we didn't have any celeriac last year.
To be fair, in other seasons I've sown the seed in March, and it's been okay. It just wasn't last season. So I'm going to try sowing some now, and I'll also sow some again in March. The seed packet does actually say that I can sow these seeds in February. So I'm not advising you to do this. This is something I'm going to do just to see how we get on. Really missed that celeriac last season. The variety I'm going to be sowing is a variety called Giant Prague. We have grown that before, and when they do come to harvest, they are a nice celeriac. Now what I have done is to pre-soak this tray in some water so that the compost is already moist. That's quite important when you're sowing things like celery and celeriac.
Very tiny seeds.
They are extremely tiny.
Yes, yeah.
And that is why we are going to broadcast sow them. They're too tiny to sow individually. And what I am going to do, I'm going to sow both the celery and the celeriac into this one tray. And so that I can denote where it is, I'm just going to stick a label in the middle. I'm going to put the celery on this side. I'm going to put the celeriac here. And all we're going to do is to broadcast the seed over the surface. You don't want to bury these seeds. You saw in my hand just how tiny they are, and they will struggle to push through and germinate. And although I have varying reasons for using vermiculite to cover any seeds that are sown, it's a really good idea to use vermiculite with these. This stuff is so light that the seedlings can push their way through. And in fact, I'm not even going to tip it on from the cup. I'm just going to sprinkle a bit on there. In fact, in many ways, even if they weren't covered, that's better than actually burying them in lots of compost on the top.
If you don't have vermiculite, then it does need just a very, very light covering of soft compost, doesn't it, really?
Oh yes.
Lightly do that.
Or as my mother now likes to think, putting porridge oats on there.
You do wind your mum up, that's so naughty, that is.
She did ask me the other day, what's that you're putting on there? And I said, well, we put porridge oats on there. Do you?
Poor mum, she falls for it every time as well, doesn't she?
Bless. Now, you can see I've just used an old mushroom container. And we've had this actually for years.
Yeah, we have.
I very rarely have to broadcast sow anything these days, so I don't need to go out and buy trays. And, you know, if you're new to gardening, that's a good little tip. Just save these and you'll be able to use them. All you need to do is to put some holes in the bottom, and so that there's some drainage, and that'll work absolutely fine. You don't need to go and spend your pounds and pence on buying some nice fancy trays. Next, I want to sow some spinach. Now, myself and Mrs. W, we always sow our spinach the back end of August, and we get tiny harvests from it all the way through the rest of the year. And then now at this time of the year, you can see here that we have quite a bit of spinach that we can now start to eat. I tend to do that because you get a long harvest. If you sow spinach now, by the time we get to June, it's going to want to rise to flower and make seed. But if you don't have the facility like us, or the space to be able to overwinter it, then now is a good time to sow your spinach, because then you'll get the maximum amount of time that you can to get your harvests. And we really like spinach. We like to add it to our salads and lots of things that we actually eat, even if it's just a little side dish. And when I sow the spinach, I like to sow 2 seeds per cell, and they go out as 2 plants. And then when they are ready for a harvest, you get a nice bunch of leaves. Now, just to finish with, I happened to see an Instagram post from Charles Dowding saying about can sow some fennel. Now, I always try to sow our fennel when it says on the seed packet. But let's face it, if Charles can do it, it's a good indication that you can do it. So I'm going to try the same, because we do like fennel. More often than not, it's one of the things we do have to buy.
We do struggle to get it to bulb, don't we?
We do, yes.
It grows, but it doesn't bulb.
We do.
I think it's probably been 5 years since we've actually grown a bulb of fennel, so
yeah,
this would be fantastic if this would work for us. Say a little prayer, please.
Well, these I'm just going to sow 1 seed per cell. I've actually sown a different variety. These are an F1 actually, called Dragon F1. Look, nice sized bulbs, Mrs. W, if we can get them. We normally do the Florence fennel. But after not having any luck with that for the last 2 or 3 seasons, we thought we'd just try something different. Now do let us know what you intend to be sowing. Are you going to be making your first sowings of the month? And if you already made some sowings, do let us know how they're getting on. 2 eggs, Mrs. W.
Yes, 2 eggs when I went to look.
So that must mean they're now going to start laying every day. We
Lovely.
have 3 chickens. Oh, the production is starting again, Mrs. W.
Yes.
New beginnings, just as with all the seeds that we have just sown. New beginnings. Now, if you haven't sown anything yet and you're still wondering what you could be sowing during the month of February, then watch this video next. Have a great rest of your gardening week, and myself and Mrs. W, we shall see you very soon.